Welcome everyone to the third and final day of the Pennsylvania Automated Vehicle Summit. Today is the Freight and Goods day of the conference. My name is Mark Kopko, once again, for those who didn't meet me on the day one, and I will be moderating today's discussion. As I shared with the first day of the summit, I would like to thank all of you for taking your time to listen to these fantastic speakers, and everyone else that we have in today's lineup. We would now like to make it a special point of thanking our platinum sponsors for the whole conference. Once again, HNTB, Locomation, and Michael Baker International. I would also like to thank today's gold sponsors, SAE and PGT Trucking. We thank our many sponsors who contributed to help us make this event possible. A few housekeeping items before we begin. As you're all aware at this point, the sessions are being recorded and we will make these available to attendees later in this year. You will also see your microphone has been automatically muted and to reduce background noise. So please feel free to use the chat function. It's located in the right side of your screen, in the lower right side, for general conversations and comments. And then most importantly, the Q&A section to ask questions about the presenters and upvote any questions you would like to hear answered. So during today's discussion, I will be pulling those questions exclusively from the Q&A section. So if any questions are posted in the chat, it's likely that we'll miss those. So please just make sure to use the Q&A function. And with that, I would now like to invite our first distinguished speaker to begin her presentation. Vivian Sun from TuSimple is the VP of Business Development. Once again, full bios on the speakers are featured on our website and also in the Summit program. And with that, Vivian, if you want to just give some background and your viewpoint and TuSimple's viewpoint on automated freight. Thank you.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Mark. And definitely appreciate the opportunity inviting myself and TuSimple to the AV Summit. I heard this is continuously being a success and super excited to share our view and our progress with the team here today. Well, before I jump into a quick blurb introduction of TuSimple, I have prepared a video to give you, all of you guys, a visual effect about what we're developing and the autonomous freight network that we're developing here at TuSimple. My name is Vivian. I'm the VP of Business Development at TuSimple. My role is to work with upstream and downstream OEM Tier 1 customer partnerships to formulate our go-to-market strategy. And I've been working with TuSimple and our team for the last 5 years and witnessing the tremendous growth. But before we go into the more detailed introduction, please enjoy this video from TuSimple. If you don't mind, play the video for the team.
What if technology could change the world for the better?
Hope you guys enjoyed the video. That was credit to our amazing marketing team, Jason Wallace. We touch on a few elements within this video on AFN and our vision. But really, what we are trying to build here at TuSimple is a committed approach to trucking. TuSimple has been laser focused on autonomous trucking since day one, started in 2015. In the past few years, we've been very much focusing on trucking and committed to bring the most safe, fuel efficient, low cost, free capacity to the market. We believe you need to have a very strong autonomous AV level 4 technology, your strong hardware team, and go-to-market strategy to make sure that we integrate the autonomous technology to the market safely and reliably. A little bit about the company. As I mentioned, the company was established in 2015. We have been showcasing our technology along the corridor of I-10. Currently, we're running autonomous fleet between Phoenix, Tucson, El Paso, Dallas, and the Texas Triangle. We do have plan to expand our AFN even furthermore, mostly focus on the I-10 corridor, the Sun Belt, and some of the lower states. TuSimple right now, I can't still believe it myself, have 1,300 people. All of them are laser focused on trucking, and that's our goal to bring autonomous truck at scale to the market by 2024. How can we do that? It's working with Navistar, working with Traton and our OEM partners. TuSimple announced a industry first partnership with Navistar Group last year in 2020 July. In the partnership, TuSimple and Navistar will be jointly collaborating and design autonomous truck from the ground up. We're aiming to have autonomous truck at scale at production from the factory level by 2024, which means fleets are able to access autonomous solution, fully autonomous system, and fully autonomous vehicles by the year of 2024, which is pretty imminent. TuSimple also went on a full-blown IPO earlier this year, April. We were also the first autonomous driving company ever in the world to be listed publicly. We went through a traditional IPO in the spirit of TuSimple's openness, transparency, and to offer more data and more information to the investors and public to analyze. We have also been very strong in building our ecosystem partnerships with, as I mentioned, the upstream OEMs, tier ones, but also downstream customers together to build and extend our AFN network. We've been working very closely with partners like UPS, McLean, US Express, and really combine TuSimple's autonomous driving experience with industry, decades of experience of working on trucking. We believe that, through partnership, through the ecosystem building up, that's the only way to bring autonomous truck to a commercial level safely and reliably. TuSimple also are building a lot of the infrastructure work, as a part of the AFN. We are going to be working with Ryder as part of our terminal partners to access their hundreds of locations over the entire United States to help us extend our AFN network. We also are laser focused on safety. We believe that autonomous driving is going to be really important, and safety is certainly our North Star. We've been working very closely with our OEM partners on automotive safety, working with our operating partners as customers on operational safety and fleet safety. So that's our goal, is to bring the autonomous truck to the market and bring all this benefit to the market. The other benefit I need to mention for autonomous trucking is the fuel saving. We did a study with University of California in San Diego. I was really glad to find out that our system can perform 10% better fuel performance-wise versus its human counterparts. We also are able to confirm this analysis from academic perspective with our practical data, working with our shipper and fleet customers day in, day out, confirming a data over 10% fuel saving. And that's even during the time we haven't been focusing on maximizing the fuel efficiency of our system. So the future is really bright and really exciting. But I think the goal for here today to have this panel discussion is to talk about what it is and what is not. There are a lot of noise and there's a lot of different messaging on what this technology can be and cannot be. But as really a person who live and breathe it, I'm happy to share my insights and happy to answer all of your questions because we believe that by working together as industry, that's the only way we can increase the adoption and the excitement around the technology. So I'll stop there, and really excited for the panel and for the discussion and the questions that will coming from Mark and the audience. Thank you.
Thank you, Vivian. Audience, please remember, post your questions that you may have for Vivian and or upvote any questions that you would like answered in the Q&A function. Our other distinguished speaker is Selika Talbot, Autonomous Vehicle Consulting's founder and American University professional lecturer. With that, Selika, I will turn it over to you.
Good afternoon. A big shout out to Pennsylvania's Autonomous Vehicle Summit, and thank you for having me here this afternoon. I look forward to the discussion with Mark and Vivian. I am passionate about all things transportation, but particularly new mobility and equity in transportation. I'm pleased that the opportunity to offer my thoughts on future autonomous vehicles and the policies that shaped where we are today and hopefully improve where we're going in the future. I am both an advocate and an educator. My past practice included being a product liability attorney for almost 20 years, coupled with my stints at the state and the federal government has given me a unique vantage point on this industry. The idea of autonomous vehicles was first introduced to me in the cartoon The Jetsons. We may have had that experience as well. The creators of the Jetsons clearly thought about the challenges that the real world faced and invented, albeit in cartoon version, solutions for these problems. But it wasn't real world. What you're doing here today in Pittsburgh, in the state of Pennsylvania, and around the country is real world. Transformational, redefining mobility, being tested and rolled out, and you're contributing towards an improved outcome of better, more effective transportation, creating, shaping, and advancing technology that's capable of saving lives, time, and money, and changing the way that the world moves. States around the country, and certainly here in Pennsylvania, find it's a time for renewed sense of purpose. Perhaps you see the urgency of the need for new mobility as we grapple with issues of homelessness and food deprivation, climate change and joblessness. And I'm sure your leadership is challenging each and every one of you to be more thoughtful, more engaged, more enthusiastic, to be more curious and ask more questions and share your ideas, all in pursuit of improving mobility for all. I trust that we in this industry are striving for the same goal: autonomous vehicle adoption and widespread use, but not necessarily the same outcome. I not only want to see autonomous vehicles in widespread use, I want it to improve mobility, provide access to food, jobs, healthcare, housing, and so forth. Pennsylvania, and especially Pittsburgh, has been an early adopter and incubator for autonomous vehicle piloting, mapping, and testing. Like much of the country, Pennsylvania has had to create their own regulatory framework as we lack a federal governing act on AVs. What I hope and strive towards in my work is to ensure that whether it's the cities, states, and eventually the federal level, that we keenly understand the deficits and even harm that has been caused by past and current transportation policies and utilize this disruptive turn towards autonomous vehicles as an opportunity to address these ills. Who should pay for improvements to transportation systems? How should we pay for roadway infrastructure? Should we move from a gas tax if we want to concentrate more and be more dependent on alternative fuels? How do we increase the number of women in the industry, and not just as drivers, but in the C-suites and boardrooms of trucking companies? Should we exempt certain classes of goods from autonomous vehicle movement, such as livestock or hazardous materials? We have a supply chain crisis. Who should care? For decades, the professional truck driver, although the #1 job in 29 states in America, has had to put up with low wages, long detention times, limited parking, ever-changing hours of service, and the distracted passenger driver. And in many instances, the public doesn't even respect the job that they do. And now we have established what I'm calling a love affair. We want things delivered not just in a few days, no longer overnight, but in a few hours. And finally, the world is taking notice of a system that has been broken for decades. We are all impacted by freight delays. This is what happens when we ignore equity concerns. Eventually, it winds up impacting all of us. There are major inequities in trucking. 90% of all motor carriers are small companies with 10 or less trucks, but seemingly they have little say on the direction of the industry and little engagement on the benefits of advanced driver assistance systems, much less autonomous vehicle technology. The average truck driver is over 50 years old for a job that frankly demands youth. The hours are grueling, it has a physical impact on the human body, and often the truck driver spends long periods of time away from home. Oftentimes, technology is solving a problem that exists, but I don't know if that's the case for autonomous vehicles. I personally believe that in this instance, the technology was being developed and they bumped up against a problem and realized this might be a solution to some of the significant issues that we're facing, not just a nice to have. But like many instances in this country, there has to be a political reckoning or a groundswell of public engagement for transformational shift to be effectuated. As my former boss used to say, if you enter the field today as a professional truck driver, you will be able to retire after a lifetime of work. We need both the professional truck driver and autonomous vehicle technology to be able to meet the need of the movement of goods and to ensure more people get healthy food with less expense and less impact to our environment. We have incredible sustainability issues with the loss of significant number of drivers each year, not to mention the issue of driver pay. As a truck driver is generally getting paid for the miles driven, and yet they spend many, many hours each day performing tasks other than driving. With the advent of autonomous vehicle trucking, we know that it has the ability to complement an industry that needs more workers and digital systems and a network to operate more efficiently. Autonomous vehicles can assist in all of that. There's a lot of work to be done, but the more goods we can move in a safe and efficient manner means fresher food on our tables, medicine to those who are ill, jobs that are well paying, and a clear and concise outline of the road that lays ahead for those of us who value equity, transportation, and mobility. Thank you.
Thank you, Selika. Audience, once again, please post your questions in the Q&A section here for Selika and also for Vivian. And remember to upvote any questions you would like to have answered. And with this, we'll get into the discussion of today's session, which I'm very excited about here. I think this will be a great discussion. Being the moderator, I'm going to take my own prerogative here, and I'll ask the first question. And you both hit on it. Selika with different policies and states taking an active role here, and then Vivian with your TuSimple autonomous network here. This is a unique feature, I think, about automated freight versus, say, ride hailing or transit use cases, where you are going to be constantly crossing jurisdictional borders. Now, with this, there's for the foreseeable future, there's no clear direction on whether or not anything's going to happen at the federal level. So we'll always have what a lot of people are calling a patchwork of different regulatory and laws in place, and sometimes just the absence of law in general too. So what do you see as the implications of this patchwork? And is there anything that you think states should be working towards in parallel or in partnership with the federal government? So I'll open up to both of you. Whoever wants to take that first. But I'd love to hear both your thoughts on this.
Yeah, and thank you, Mark. I can take a stab at the first question, and I think this is a good question. Usually when people ask me why there wasn't enough autonomous investment, to the trucking space, I usually like to say, well, I think, people are overlooking the importance of trucking, and trucking needs some love. When this beginning of the autonomous driving industry started to bloom, and when I was joining industry 5 years ago, I think a lot of investment went into trucking. Went into robo-taxi, but that's also overlook the fact of actually trucking is the best use case for autonomy. It is much more stable. You are almost always geofenced with the areas of the highway system, and the routes for the middle mile are very repetitive. So these are all very beneficial to the adoption of autonomy, especially for trucking the middle mile. And you mentioned the patchwork today we have on different states. It is the fact that every different state have a slightly different policy on whether this is a executive order. We are facing different attitude towards the autonomous trucking world, but generally we see very positive adoption in most states. I think I may get this number wrong, but we have a stats, almost over 30 states today allow autonomous driving testing. Over 25 plus states allow autonomous testing and commercial deployment. So we are having a very much favorable autonomous regulatory environment in the United States comparing to a lot of countries in the world, in EU or in Asia. So even though we're facing with this patchwork during our testing phase and deployment phase, we're actually not hugely impacted by it. During our course of our company and our testing, every state and everywhere we go, we are faced with a very warm welcome. And we work very closely with the local law enforcement, the local DOT, to make sure what we do is in line with what they're expecting and all the new innovation are happening. But I am happy to notice, and I think from our government affairs team within TuSimple, that there is a federal rulemaking process undertaking that is looking at a 50-state solution. Even though we don't have a timeline for it, but I think the US DOT, FMCSA are working very closely together, trying to have a 50-state solution in the near future to allow more rapid adoption, of course, with the boundaries of safety and the regulations we have. So we're very positive. This is actually one of the common myths that people think regulation is behind. We like to say the opposite. The regulation in the United States is actually ahead of the technology, which is always a good thing to encourage more investment, more companies, more talents to join the industry. So I will stop there. I think the only challenge so far we face by crossing the state border is the weigh station. Every single state have a little different way of doing the weigh station interface. So that's the main problem we're facing with from a day-to-day operation perspective. We got to think a way to interact and integrate and potentially have a better solution to interact with this facility and current infrastructure. Well, the vehicle will be looking at the future and potentially it will be unmanned.
Selika, especially with your background in FMCSA, I'm curious on your viewpoint on any potential patchwork and implications associated with that.
Well, I think that the fortune for a company like TuSimple is they have the AFN, this freight network where they're operating in unique states that are more than welcoming. They're encouraging and seem like they're partners with TuSimple. But we have lots of states that don't have any real concrete policies and internal regulations to govern movement of freight. The Northeast, in particular, seems almost in drought state. Many instances, it's based on concerns of weather during the wintertime and elevation in terrain. I believe that in the gap, because there is a gap without federal government regulation, that associations like AMVA, and because I was a deputy administrator of a state motor vehicle commission, AMVA is the association of the American Association of Motor Vehicle Administrators. They set a lot of the policy and guidelines and work closely with DOTs within states and the federal DOT. And in fact, they set the standards for CDL drivers across America. AMVA has policies that they've put in place, thoughtful guidelines for the movement of autonomous vehicles across the country. And I think that if we could get all states on board to say, all right, the federal government hasn't gotten here yet, but we can agree that this is the minimum set of standards that we can operate in, we'll move closer towards widespread use and adoption. But in some instances, it's closer for you to drive across a state border than for you to drive the length or the width of your state. So in terms of the movement of goods, the more we're able to move seamlessly from one side of the country to the next, the better off we are in terms of equity for the transportation of goods and services for people.
Great points. So as we move towards adoption, a question for both of you, and maybe Selika, I'll ask you this first. One that we always hear, especially from our Pennsylvania Motor Trucking Association, is just the number of trucking in the trucking industry that is actually small firms. So according to a 2020 FMCSA report, approximately 90% of FMCSA regulated carriers have fleets of 10 power units or less. Do you think automation will open up opportunities for these small carriers, or will this potentially hinder any type of advancements for them just because it's harder to get into the game than just upfront costs potentially?
Well, at this point, we have to have greater public government engagement in order not to have that latter scenario where the small mom and pop companies are hindered by the movement of technology. We don't want that. We know that for a time, we will have autonomous vehicles on the road with human-driven vehicles having to figure out how to move and manipulate across the roadways. But the expense of a tractor and a trailer for mom and pop operations is a significant cost for their business. They can't turn it over that easily, and they won't be able to see a drastic shift towards autonomous vehicles for the preponderance of the industry. So we have to make sure that there are incentives to have those who have these small companies lean into ADAS, this advanced driver assistance systems that make it safer for them to be in the roadway, and to educate them on the benefits of autonomous vehicle driving. I think all too often, what we have right now is a segment of the industry who appears to not want this new technology to be out there on the roadways because they're fearful for their jobs. If we are more honest about what the technology can and can't do, where it can and can't operate, and how we are a complement to the existing professional driver in opposed to being a replacement, we would be much further along in terms of getting to widespread use.
Vivian, you got any thoughts?
Yeah, at TuSimple, we developed the level 4 technology. I don't know how the audience is familiar with the SAE system. From 0 to 5, 0 basically is no automation. 1 to 3 are the human engaged automations, the ADAS, as Selika mentioned. Level 4 and level 5, starting from level 4, you can have driver out of the loop, fully autonomous, so to speak. And that's where we are focusing our development. That's a level 4 system, the geofence area, what we call ODD, operational design domain. Basically, these are the lanes we define with our customers to build the AFN for them. The reason I mentioned this background is because this question is a really important one. Looking at all the announcements, all the autonomous driving company have made, the partnership they have formulated, most of them are with pretty large fleet and shippers who have a lot of resources and capital, and a team basically to looking at advanced technology and future. To be honest, during our conversation with the fleets, from adoption perspective, it's easier for the AV company to be looking at some of the bigger company who have more dense freight. With that being said, you have a very important stat that is 90% of the freight operators have a fleet of 10 or less. That's the fact we're living with, and then the trucking industry is a very fragmented industry. By just working with the quote unquote bigger companies, it doesn't really get our job done. The job is to bring autonomous, reliable, autonomous freight to the market. So I believe that there need to be more business model innovations to engage with the smaller fleet and smaller operators, because there is a huge benefit for them, since autonomous truck will be able to run 24/7, rain and shine, day or night. So really, it's a good revenue generation tool for them to be using in their fleet, instead of using the mom and pops, their health and their actual hours to contribute to their constant revenue stream. So I think the industry, TuSimple included, are thinking about what are the business models that we can bring to the market that engage with a large majority of the operators. One of the examples we have provided during our IPO is this Airbnb model, right? So you can have, if you're interested in own autonomous fleet to put on AFN, you can, just like Airbnb, put it on the network and enjoy the benefit of autonomous truck running continuously for you. So that's just one example, but I think as an industry, that's really an important question for us to figure out. How do we engage and also enable the large majority of our operators?
So going to a question here that was submitted from a member of the audience here. With lower prices and faster shipments, there should be an increase in truck freight movement. Has there been any estimates on what this potential increase could be? And then also, from your viewpoint, what do you think the implications might be on the railroad system? Is this going to be taken away, or is this going to be more of a supplement to an already strained network? So, Selika, I'll ask you this first. Do you have any thoughts on this?
Well, first of all, I believe strongly in the notion of a network. It's not either or. We're all in part of a complement of things that we need to do to get greater mobility across the country for both goods and for people. So I don't think we're in any way negatively impacting the railroad industry. We might in fact be creating benefits for the industry by having autonomous vehicle movement. When you talk about lower prices and faster shipping, should there be an increase in truck freight movement? Of course, there'll be an increase in movement. How do we map out that increase? Do we insist that we have electrification because we know that trucks on the road are emitting certain negative emissions and harmful emissions into our environment? Do we say that because you can move in any manner, and as Vivian said, 24 hours a day, a lot of the movement that can take place at night will be moved overnight and free up the congestion and traffic that we have on the roadways during the day? There are benefits from having lower prices and faster shipment. It's better for your food. Your food will be cheaper and fresher and therefore more nutritious. I mean, the benefits begin to really stack up, and then it's hard to say that they're negatives from having an increase in freight movement across the country.
Well, I think that's very well said, Selika, and I agree with you. We believe that autonomous trucking is an alternative mode of transportation. It is not either or with the current trucking or the railroad industry. We actually have CN Railroad invested in TuSimple during our last round of investment because they see the autonomous trucking as a supplement to how they operate the intermodal and railroad today. For example, the CN Railroad have certain operations within Memphis, and TuSimple's autonomous truck and autonomous fleet or autonomous lanes is going to be able to extend their railhead to help them reach more customers when the railroads sometimes are a little more difficult to map out new lanes and new hubs. So I think we see autonomous truck really as an alternative mode of transportation to be collaborating with air freight, with the railroads, and with the current trucking industry. It's very much complementary to each other, and we want to design a system that is going to be able to address the pain point of our current industry, able to do a plug and play and to do more integrated instead of a negative disruption. We want to have a positive influence on the industry. And I do believe there is a huge deficit actually with what the trucking industry can support from a capacity perspective versus what the customers are willing to are expecting. I mean, as we speak now, there are so many vessels waiting, outside of LA port. That is one extreme case, right? During COVID. But even before COVID, there are shipments, sit in LA port for days and months that are not able to be moved. These are all missed opportunity and missed efficiency that as an industry we are able and we should be able to tap into. So I think before even we start to increase the movement, which I believe there will be huge increase, we are able to meet the deficit of the current demand to trucking and trucking industry.
I'm glad you mentioned ports, and I think this is to a question here that we have from the audience. 76% of all trades involve some sort of marine transportation, so it's coming into our ports. So as we start looking towards automation and freight, what are your thoughts on ways that we can expedite unloading of goods from U.S. ports using automated trucking, using other automation within the ports and the surrounding areas to just try and expedite that?
Part of this is issues that have been a problem in our trucking industry, as I said, for decades, with truckers sitting in these long detention times at ports without this, when we operate on pieces of paper, we're not as efficient as when we can operate through technology systems. And we need more digitized systems to move people and goods in our ports. Part of it is also the local regulations. I think one of the things I saw this last week is the port of Long Beach didn't allow the tankers to be traveled, the trailers to be stacked more than 2 at a time. Now they've had a bright idea. Yeah, we can stack them a little higher. And now we're going to create a little bit more space on the ports. Some of this is, as I've said, getting out of your office. I'm talking about from the government side, getting out of your office, physically being present to see what the issues are, and creating problem solving that doesn't require us to rip up the fabric of who we are, but there's some low-hanging fruit that we can take advantage of now to improve conditions and then work on systemic changes that need to take place. The concerns about freight movement are because people are sending an alarm that Christmas is going to be a problem this year. But for some people, every day has been a problem for a very long time because of the inefficiencies that have been in the system.
From a TuSimple perspective, I'm going to dive into it. We actually believe that one of the port operation is going to be one of the better use cases for autonomous truck solution. I forgot to mention in my introduction, TuSimple is a global company. Of course, our headquarters is in San Diego. Our operations is here in Arizona. We do have offices in China and in Europe, which in both regions, the port operation are hugely advancing and very much automated from crane and all the entire system. In China, for example, we've been working with Yangshan Port, which is part of the Shanghai larger port and is the largest deep water port in the world. What we have been working with them is a solution to connect the train station, inline train station, to the port so that the drayage will be all automated on this Donghai Bridge. The goal is to really replace all of the current congestion and human errors. We actually have a video of people on the bridge just watching their phone on some sort of computation for like 2 hours. We have so many of these data, but the goal is to really automate the bridge operation and connecting the port and the train in the inland station. And similarly here in the US, we believe that the drayage operation is another good use case of autonomy. Of course, we need to do a ton of integration with the port ingress and egress system, which is very much, as Selika mentioned, can be improved, more digitalized and more standardized. So that's always a problem we face with integrating with the current system, our logistics system, our operations. Yes, we will have very sophisticated autonomous trucks and autonomous driving system, but we still have to interact with these infrastructures. So we have to bring all of these infrastructure up to speed so we can have very smooth, very quick transition and integration so we don't waste time and money and resources into working with the older system and then updating them over time. So I do believe autonomous truck will be a good use case for port operations, for drayage specifically.
So we talked a lot about the potential benefits of automated freight, and things from just improved efficiencies to just trying to get to some of these equity concerns. But ultimately, that's not going to happen unless you have public acceptance. And across the board, on most national surveys, automation tends to have a negative viewpoint. Pennsylvania, we did a public survey here over the summer through our advisory committee. We found that about 40% of people had a more negative viewpoint on automated freight versus the traditional passenger vehicle. And especially a technology here that's progressing arguably a little bit faster right now on the trucking side than on the passenger vehicle side. There's a lot of education that needs to be done here to try and get some additional public support, or at least public understanding. I'll ask you here first, Vivian. What's your viewpoint on what should be done right now to educate the average American about this technology what it is, what it isn't, and what we should be looking towards the future?
Great question, Mark. And it's a very good and important question. And I do believe public acceptance right now is not ready for fully autonomous vehicles, especially trucks, when you see an 18-wheeler without a driver in it. I would understand that image myself because we have testing every single day. And I think the response from a public is understandable. I have family and friends, when I tell them what I do, the response immediately was, oh, that's scary. I don't blame them at all. Humans are naturally more afraid of the unknown. And these are autonomous systems that are going to be put on the market, interacting with our civilian, our passenger vehicle on a daily basis. So I think all these questions and concerns are justified. Now, I do think it is our job, TuSimple and industry, other autonomous driving company, to build the trust towards the public. We need to be very open and transparent. I like, Selika, how you put it, what it is, what is not, what it can do, what cannot do, to really create the trust and openness to talk about the benefit of autonomous driving, the use case of autonomous trucking, and how is it going to be adopted. Not going to be here overnight, over 50 states, thousands of them. As a developer, we would certainly wish that's the case, but it's going to be a very slow and not a stair-step approach, going from I-10 corridor, some of the more, heavy and traffic and pain points of the trucking industry, extended to I-10 at 40 going north. I mean, that's going to be taking years of our development and collaboration with the public. So I think showing some of these progress and how we're going to positively impact people's lives is going to be really important. Of course, I think safety is absolutely important. It, as I mentioned, North Star of everything we do. So I think also talking about the safety benefit is also a little bit counterintuitive, to be honest, when you think about human driver performance versus a robot. But when you're looking at statistics, 90% of the accidents are because of human errors. So now think about this autonomous system that doesn't need to have biological brake, doesn't need to rush home. It is definitely thinking about in your fleet, every single driver is a 2 million driver, 2 million mile safe driver, right? That's the goal of our autonomous driving system. And that's really what the benefit of autonomy drives to at the end of the day. That is to bring safety to our road, also bring capacity to the industry as we talk about the shortages and the supply issue. So at the end of the day, I think, as a company, as an industry, openness, transparency, let's talk about the benefit. Let's talk about the real situation of our current status. And let's not try to, let's try to have a dialogue, more openly and more transparently.
Selika?
I have to agree with everything that Vivian said. We in the industry have an obligation to tell our story, and in as many places as possible. So from an education standpoint, whenever we roll out new and transformational technologies or issues in this country, we make sure the very young have an idea about what's going on. So obviously they won't get the technical details, but we start to educate and inform even very young children about different methods of transportation to include autonomous vehicles. When young people are getting ready at this point in their lives, not 5 and 10 years, but today, we should be in every state in the nation putting questions on our written tests to have a driver's license about autonomous vehicles so that they're aware about the incoming changes to mobility in this country. I often say, if you pick me to be queen for the day, I would insist on a Super Bowl commercial that addresses autonomous vehicles in a way that is clear and truthful. We don't have autonomous vehicles for sale for individual people in this country today. We need to say that loud and clear. We are working on making sure that this is as safe an industry as can possibly be. We need to make that loud and clear. We need to talk about, we're not displacing professional drivers. We need to sing that loud and clear. But we also need to share the deficits and inefficiencies in our systems today and how autonomous vehicles can make our collective lives better. If we tell that story, people won't tolerate autonomous vehicles, they'll be begging for them.
Excellent points. Excellent points. And I will look forward to the TuSimple Super Bowl commercial this year, and we'll look back on this and say, yeah, this is Selika's free consulting right there. This is where it came from. So let's talk safety. We're all in the transportation industry, and at the heart of everything we do is safety. So, what do you think should be done, especially at the federal level, say with FMCSA, with policies to promote the safe adoption and regulation of this technology? So I'll start with you, Selika.
I'm trying to be good. It's like the third rail for me. Listen,
sorry about that.
I'm going to be honest. I think that the agency, as it stands today, is supportive of movement towards autonomous vehicles. And we've been there, even when I was with the agency, moving from 2.0 to 3.0 to 4.0 for autonomous vehicle guidance. I know that companies like TuSimple, Localmation, Aurora Plus, Waymo, all of them have come into DOT and to FMCSA and sort of opened their books and said, this is what we're doing. This is where we want to go. And it is our goal to be as safe as possible. Having said all that, these companies are at the pinnacle of technology. The people and the knowledge within FMCSA today is not able to match that of the private sector. They don't have the bandwidth to test every autonomous vehicle, the company that comes into them, to say, okay, I'm going to give you a gold star, or today we've decided you don't make it. They're not equipped. So we have to set up other ways in order to determine that the vehicles are safe. Those ways exist, whether it's with the military or universities. There are ways that the federal government can engage with other partners to confirm the safety. But what I will say to you, and I practiced almost a little over 18 years as a product liability defense lawyer, the industry is so invested in safety. They're not pitted against each other in a safety paradigm. Each and every one of these companies wants the other company to be safe and successful, because if they aren't, it harms their business. So there is the collective drive towards safety, much like we see the FAA and we see all these airlines who have come together to determine we want our airways to be safe. We want people to trust that they can get on a plane and get from destination A to destination to point B. I believe we need an apparatus like that within the federal government. I've talked often and written often about an AV-EV mobility czar or some AV-EV commission that stands separate and apart, because I think it serves the industry best. It is hard for highway to do all the work that they're doing with infrastructure, yet turn to mobility and give it the kind of energy and real thoughtful consideration that it deserves. That should be carved out. I've also said, and don't stick it under the Department of Transportation, because mobility impacts your food, your health, your housing, and a variety of other things. It should be a standalone reporting to the White House so that we can give mobility, autonomous and electric mobility, our new mobility paradigm, the kind of attention that it needs without having to be pitted one secretary of a department against another secretary of a department. Right now, We have an infrastructure bill that hasn't even taken into account autonomous vehicles. Yet this industry is a multi-billion-dollar industry that can change the very fabric of the way we live and communicate each and every day. We don't have enough attention at the federal level. We need more. We need to own that we haven't done what we should have done to date. And then the White House needs to take this on directly and not parse it off to anyone else. That's why I said it was the third rail, Mark. I'm calling them out.
Hey, I'm seeing a couple clapping emojis here in the audience here. So I think your words are ringing true with some people here, and I definitely can say that it resounds with, within PennDOT. We have a similar viewpoint. I see more clapping hands. So standing ovation you just got here virtually. Vivian, from TuSimple standpoint, what's the focus on safety? How do you make sure that it's ingrained within your culture? It's ingrained within everything you do.
I want to echo what Selika mentioned. The industry is working together as a whole. We can testify that because we're part of that conversation day in, day out. There is actually industry coalition with the names that was mentioned today as frenemy, competitors, if you may, but all AV developers trying to bring autonomous truck to the market. We have a coalition to work together, one, to align our messaging on how do we communicate to the public in a fair, transparent, open way, but two is to work collectively with federal agencies, with government officials to get the support we need to advance technology continuously. So it is absolutely right. We are not pit against each other. Instead, we wish each other success because that's the only way the autonomous driving industry can be surviving, can be thriving, and can have a better soil of adoption for all of us. From a pure safety perspective, that's why I also mentioned that it's the ecosystem we're building here at TuSimple and industry is very unique. You don't see a lot of industry is at an intersection of many, many fronts. What we are developing here is an intersection of transportation, trucking, supply chain, automotive, AI, machine learning, and that's really unique. You don't see that often. You're at an intersection of many industries, and I joke around with some of our colleagues that I probably even wouldn't cross their path if not weren't for TuSimple, because of the different backgrounds and different people we have to bring here together to build this autonomous driving system and AFN network. So within the safety, certainly we have the OEMs and tier ones from building the system equipment perspective. We're aiming to have at least 1 million mileage of autonomous truck life cycle, similarly to how the current trucks are performing today. So that requires tremendous investment, investigation, verification, validation from the design perspective to make sure the next couple of years every single component on the vehicle are safe and reliable, and putting together the truck and the vehicle is safe. And that's no small task. Every single part on this vehicle are completely new. The steering needs to be redundant, the braking need to be redundant, the camera, the sensor, the LiDAR, the EDC, the control unit, you name it. Every single thing are developed specifically for autonomous driving in the past few years. So we are, as an industry, facing tremendous challenge on our own supply chain issue to make sure that we develop a very safe system on the equipment perspective. There's certainly a lot of safety consideration and safety measurement we're taking internally on developing our own autonomous stack, autonomous system. I'm certainly not the expert there to give you a big, deep dive in that, but I think our co-founder Xiaodi Ho, our CTO Xiaodi, have mentioned many times that we have a unique approach to handle safety, to increase the system performance continuously and measure the benchmark, the performance of our system towards other autonomous driving system, towards human drivers. So we strive towards a better performance of our vehicle behavior, certainly better on many metrics than human driver. Now, and the last point I want to make is that we have a announcement actually just made a couple of weeks ago with GeoTap. We were measuring the harsh cornering, harsh braking. These are the usual measurement you will measure whether a driver is efficient or if he or she is driving safely. In all the categories that Geotab was tracking for autonomous system, the autonomous system was performing 10 times, many multiple better than the human drivers, given how stable and how autonomous system is able to basically, see further, have more time to react, and all that factor into a better results from the data we were able to capture with Geotab. So I encourage the audience to take a look at the announcement, and that will provide some data points. Of course, that's not enough in bringing the safest autonomous truck to the market, but that's a starting point for us to engage with the public and start to talk about safety. And I think operationally, TuSimple has very rigorous measurements to make sure our testing is par and meeting all the regulation of the government and communicating with the system, with local law enforcement. We actually have two person in the vehicle every time for every single testing. We have a trained autonomous driving testing driver and also autonomous safety engineer. So two person in the testing at all times, even though that's tremendously costly, but we believe that's really necessary to make sure all of our testing on the public road are safe and doesn't become a hazard.
Fantastic. I think you both hit the nail on the head here. Safety, it takes a variety of things, but collaboration and transparency are definitely two of the key elements here to make it happen. And it's critical for industry to work together. And like everything here, when you're having fun, time flies here. And I see that we're here at the end of the session. So before I give them the quick housekeeping notes here, I encourage the audience. We have the clapping emoji at the bottom. Normally in person, we would be standing up and clapping right now. But I personally thought this was a great discussion, and hopefully everyone else did here too. Very much appreciate both you, Selika, and both you, Vivian, taking some time out of your day here to come talk to us. I think this is absolutely the type of discussion you need to have in order to see this technology safely and properly advance. From a public policy standpoint, from a public acceptance standpoint. So very much appreciate both you taking time to talk with us. Very, very thought-provoking comments and questions were given by the audience and responses back. So thank you. So please join me in applauding our speakers here this morning. And with that, we are right here at 2 o'clock. We will now exit presentation mode and go back into the conference room where you have 15 minutes to chat with other attendees if you like. When you're ready, you can move to the first breakout session. Please go to the directory in the top left of your screen and open the drop-down menu and select your breakout session. The breakout sessions that are occurring next are the AV Policy Programs and Initiatives Update session and the first last mile freight session. Once you're ready to head back to the breakout sessions, please open it directly and choose the session you would like to attend. We also like to point out that today is the last day of the 2021 Virtual PA AV Summit. We are hoping to be back in person next year. Pittsburgh is where we'll be located, and that will then be at the same time here, end of October. We have a banner on the side menus here that you can click to find out more. And so we hope next year that we can see everyone here in person. But with that, thank you once again to our presenters here this morning. And thank you to you all, and enjoy the rest of the summit and then the breakouts. Thank you.